On Friday, Iranians went to the polls to elect their new president in the aftermath of Ebrahim Raisi's mysterious death in a helicopter crash earlier this year. Now, no candidate won an outright majority, which means that we're now due for a runoff election on July 5th. But in a shock result, a reformist candidate came in first place and is now arguably the favourite to win the runoff. So in this video, we're going to take a look at how presidential elections work in Iran, why the results were so surprising, and what a reformist victory might mean for Iranian politics. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So to understand why this result is surprising, we need a bit of context. While Iran obviously isn't a democracy in the usual sense of the word, the regime still holds regular but controlled elections. The most important of these has always been the presidential election, which is normally every 4 years. Now, this election is controlled insofar as presidential candidates have to be vetted and approved by the Guardian Council, a group of 12 clerics and judges who are generally loyal to the supreme leader. Now, you might assume, given the regime's repressive tendencies, that the Guardian Council only ever allow loyalist or hardline candidates, but this hasn't always been the case. In fact, until really quite recently, there would always be at least one candidate from the so-called reformist camp on the ballot, and they did actually win sometimes. Reformist Mohammad Khatami won in both 1997 and 2001, and another, albeit more moderate reformist, Hassan Rouhani, won in both 2013 and 2021. In between them was hardliner Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, but he wasn't exactly a loyalist and constantly sparred with the Ayatollahs. Now, the regime allowed more moderate candidates because genuine elections with real choice and therefore high turnouts were a way for the Ayatollahs to simultaneously gauge public opinion and legitimize their rule, both to the Iranian public and the international community. Khatami's first election in 1997, for instance, where he won with about 70% of the popular vote, saw an unprecedented 80% turnout, higher than most Western democracies. The regime could also always just veto any reforms they didn't like, which is what happened with Khatami's pro-democracy reforms, even though they passed parliament. However, as relations between the Ayatollahs and the Iranian public have soured over the past few years, evidenced by the reoccurring and widespread protests, the regime apparently decided that letting reformists run was just too risky. But this is presumably both because they're worried that their electoral success might be interpreted as proof of the regime's unpopularity, and because a reformist candidate might end up becoming the face of any future anti-regime protests. And this is why, in 2021, no well-known reformists or popular candidates were allowed to run, essentially gifting the presidency to hardliner and regime loyalist Ebrahim Raisi. Now, the lack of real choice meant that the 2021 election saw the lowest turnout in Iranian electoral history, at just 48%, down from 73% in 2017. And there are also a record 3.8 million spoiled ballots. Anyway, after Raisi's death, most people expected the regime to pull a similar stunt, and only let pro-regime hardline loyalists into the race. However, while 5 of the 6 candidates approved by the Guardian Council last month were indeed relatively hardline, they also let one reformist candidate, a long-standing but relatively unknown MP called Masoud Pezeshkian. Now, Pezeshkian is not a radical reformer. Unlike traditional reformists, he hasn't said anything about making Iran more democratic or changing the balance of power within the republic. And he's actually signaled that he would be fundamentally loyal to Khomeini, although admittedly he couldn't really say anything else in the current political climate. Nonetheless, his policy platform would still be radically different from his predecessor. For instance, he said that he'd stop requiring Iranian women to wear the hijab, arguing that it's not required by Islamic law and it's impossible to enforce anyway. He's also said that he'd try to improve relations with the West and restart negotiations on the nuclear deal with the US to get sanctions lifted and help resuscitate Iran's struggling economy. Now, the Ayatollahs probably let Pezeshkian run because they didn't think that he'd win, but hoped that his candidacy would boost turnout and mitigate the regime's ongoing legitimacy crisis. They might have also been thinking that even if he did win, his plans to resuscitate the nuclear deal would ultimately be scuppered by Trump's likely return to the White House, which is what brought down Rouhani in 2021. Now, originally, Pezeshkian's candidacy did indeed look like a long shot. Many analysts thought that Pezeshkian would suffer the same fate as Abdel Nasser Hamati, who was nominally the Reformist candidate in 2021. Now, Hamati wasn't well known or an effective campaigner, and it was so immediately apparent that he wasn't going to win that the Reformist camp in Iranian politics didn't even really bother to support him. But while Pezeshkian isn't a great campaigner either, this time the Reformist camp has come out in full force behind him. Most notably, Pezeshkian is backed by both Khatami and Rouhani, as well as Mohammad Javad Zarif, a former foreign minister who is today one of Iran's most high-profile politicians. Anyway, in the first round of voting, Pezeshkian came out on top, winning 44% of the vote. In second place, with 40% of the vote, was Saeed Jalili, a hardliner who served as the famously uncompromising chief nuclear negotiator under Ahmadinejad, who advocates for confrontation with America, deeper engagement with Russia and China, and resists any social liberalization. What makes this result so extraordinary, though, is the fact that turnout came in at 40%, the lowest since 1979. Now, low turnout has historically benefited hardliners, because it's usually driven by moderate voters deciding that not voting or spoiling their ballots is a better way of expressing opposition to the regime than voting for a token reformist candidate. And while low turnout isn't good for Pezeshkian because it suggests there's little enthusiasm for his candidacy, it's especially terrible for hardliners and the Ayatollahs, both because it suggests they're even less popular than in 2021, and because it further undermines the regime's legitimacy. So what actually happens next? Well, at first glance, it looks like Jalili should win, given that the third-place candidate, Mohammad Ghalibaf, is also a hardliner, and has since told his 15% of voters to vote for Jalili. However, there are still two reasons to think that Pezeshkian could win. Firstly, at least some Ghalibaf voters will go to Pezeshkian, because Ghalibaf was a more moderate figure than Jalili. But second, while Pezeshkian might have struggled in a runoff against someone like Ghalibaf, he might be able to beat Jalili by running a sort of Project Fear campaign, using fear of a Jalili presidency to motivate reformist voters while sticking to a moderate policy platform to swing some conservative voters. And if he does win, Pezeshkian's presidency could be decisive for the reformist movement in Iran. If it ends in a damp squib, though, it could finally kill off reformist hopes of changing the system via the ballot box. Alternatively, a more active Pezeshkian presidency could rejuvenate the reformist movement in Iran, which feels like it's on the cusp of giving up and being assumed by what could be described as a new moderate camp, which is neither committed to the Ayatollah's theocratic ideals nor the reformists' lofty political aspirations, and is instead an almost technocratic movement focused on just improving ordinary Iranians' living standards. If you want to learn more, then check out Too Long, our 60-page, high-quality magazine full of TLDR's very best journalism. This issue is focused on the UK election, diving deep into the campaign, the results, and how the winners plan to fix Britain. It's more than just Britain, though, with stories including the European parliamentary elections, the countries likely to join the EU next, the latest from Gaza, the rise of Milei, and, of course, the US election. Now, we've decided to make the magazine for two reasons. Firstly, it allows our journalists to write in more detail, diving deeper and ignoring algorithmic restrictions to produce the best work we can. And secondly, it's a good way for you to support TLDR and will help us to produce free YouTube videos as long as we can. If you're interested, then you can pick up a copy from our website, where we're selling 2 editions of the magazine. Firstly, there's the standard edition, and then there's the premium edition, which gets your name printed in the thank you section of the magazine, access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, and exclusive access to our election night livestream, where we'll be reacting to the exit poll with you as it happens. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be making an issue of Too Long every 4 months. So if you want to ensure that you never miss an issue, then you can subscribe, which gets you a 25% discount. If you have more questions, there's a full Q&A linked in the description, where you'll also find a link to our store. And while you're there, make sure you use the code ELECTIONWEEK to get an additional £2 off any purchase. Thanks so much for hearing me out, and if you are interested, please do pick up a copy, as it's a great way to support our journalism and help us to continue making free YouTube videos as long as we can.